DC voters, I'm Lisa Rice, native Washingtonian, proposer of Ballot Initiative 83. Let's make politicians work harder with 2 changes to our system. 1, let independents like me vote in taxpayer-funded primary elections. And 2, implement ranked choice voting to vote for your favorite candidate and rank your backup choices. Candidates need over 50% to win. Flip your ballot and vote yes on 83. Paid for by Make All Votes Count DC, Philip Pinnell, Treasurer.
Today on CityCast DC, is love really blind? 30 singles from the DC area are aiming to find out. Netflix's hit dating reality show, Love is Blind, debuted in DC, and reality TV aficionados, Chelsea Cirruzzo and Aisha Drain, are joining me to discuss the couples, the drama, and what it all says about the district. And just a heads up, there will be some spoilers from the show in our conversation. Today's Monday, October 7th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. So Asia, Chelsea, I understand that you two are basically unpaid reality TV aficionados experts.
Yes. For free, I'll just watch as much as you want.
I need a hobby, and so I'm like, I guess this is the hobby I'll accept. I'll accept that title.
So I actually never watched Love is Blind before. I watched one episode when it was Cameron and I forget the other
Lauren.
person's name. Yes. So I was like,
Yes.
Oh, I want to see this, I want to see America's favorite interracial couple. So I watched their one episode, which I enjoyed. But this was my first time watching a decent amount of Love is Blind. Have you all watched it before? Are you fans? Or did you just dip in because it's in DC?
So I have been a fan since the beginning. I think it's an evil show. This is a horrible way to get people together, but it's so entertaining. So yes, I've watched every season.
I was actually late to the party, probably similar to you, Bridget. I didn't start watching it till I covered it for the first time at Rest in Peace, DCist. But my editor at the time was just like, you need to cover this. You need to watch the show. I promise you it's worth it. And so I went home with my partner and we started it. And I've been hooked ever since. And it's an unhealthy addiction now. I can't stop watching.
How do y'all think the DC version compares to earlier iterations of the show?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I was actually surprised with it was a little bit traumatic this season, I'm not gonna lie. I do feel biased because I felt like, especially the 2 seasons before this one felt very drama heavy and kind of heavily produced. But for some reason, maybe because we're in DC and I'm like, you know what, we're representing really well. It feels like the most authentic it's been in a while. But also I've just wow, I've feel very connected, I feel to the cast members more than any other season, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think every season is regionally different. When there was, I think it was Seattle, everyone was a hiker and stuff. In some seasons, some of the contestants tend to be younger, or the demographics tend to be different depending on where they're from. I feel the DC season, because I live here and I love it here, I'm oh yeah, I could see it. It all feels a little bit more personal. So I really like this season.
So we have all binged the first 6 episodes. Those are the episodes that are currently out on Netflix. For folks who maybe haven't watched the show or maybe casual observers like myself, can one of you give us a breakdown of how it all works on Love is Blind?
It is an experiment, which everybody calls it the experiment or the process, where they take couples, all heterosexual couples, but basically they have men on one side of the wall, women on the other side, and they have dates where they can't see each other at all, but they can hear each other. So the idea is you fall in love based on somebody's personality or your conversations rather than seeing them. And the only way you can see them is if you agree to get engaged to them. So once you get engaged, you do get to see them. Then you kind of go on this little honeymoon thing with all the other couples, usually in Mexico. And then after that, they come back to the real world, they live together, and they go to the wedding. And the wedding is kind of like the moment of truth. Like, if you've ever been to a wedding where you don't know if the bride or groom will say yes at the altar, hopefully not, this is that kind of wedding. Like, yes or no.
That was a professional level breakdown of what is going on this show. I have to say I was really surprised. So I watch a lot of like dating reality TV. I'm in the middle of binging Love Island right now, which I'm loving. Compared to Love Island, Love is Blind is like, yeah, they call it the experiment. Nick and Vanessa Lachey, the host, they take it very seriously. You would think they were making, hard-hitting docu-content about what it's like to be in a romantic relationship. It's like a very serious show. So I will say I was like surprised by the cast they put together. Like I was like, it's reasonably, inclusive. I feel like generally on dating shows, it's like a bunch of white people. And then like, here's a black woman who's going to get absolutely dogged for 2 months. Enjoy, America. What do you think about the cast that they actually ended up with?
I will say, like, my first reaction when I saw the announcement, I was like, okay, I was actually hesitant. And I feel that way every season when there's like a reality TV show cast announcement and then you start to get to know the cast and you're like, okay, I see why they made these decisions. And that was exactly the case here. I was hoping like for a little more diversity, like in this, like even more, because DC is such a melting pot of an area. And so when I saw the cast, I was just like, okay, I just feel like y'all went to Navy Yard and we're like, who wants to be on the show? And I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance. But after watching the show, I think there could be a little more representation across wards, like I'm sure, and maybe a little more proper DC representation, because, we've got Northern Virginia, we've got Baltimore, we've got...
notably in DC.
Notably, yeah, very notably a part of the DMV. I'm doing heavy air quotes right now. But, like, even outside of geographically, I feel like ethnic-wise, like, I was actually pleasantly surprised with like how many like interracial couples there were. There were multiple Black couples, which I was super excited about to see in Love is Blind, because a lot of times like there's only like maybe one if you're lucky. And then also people with multi-ethnic backgrounds, which I was just like, that is very much, I feel like, representative of our region. And it's not perfect. It's never going to be, because you're going to choose entertainment over maybe other things to prioritize in reality TV. But I was really proud, I feel like, for this season, for sure.
I agree with you. It's definitely refreshing to see more diversity in shows like this. Like you mentioned, like The Bachelor still has, just so many problems with diversity and race, where they're like tokenize like their first Black bachelor, and they will put up a lot of like white women as their pool to choose from. And it just tokenizes them for this entire season. So I feel like the show does a better job.
Yeah, I want to go back to that because there were some, I kept a list of my sort of surprising moments, and a lot of them deal with race on the show. Surprise, surprise.
I know.
Like Steven?
Yeah. Oh my God, y'all. Should we just get into it? Like,
I was screaming.
Okay, so a lot of the WTF moments do centralize around race. And Asia, you were saying like, oh, people are multi-ethnic. There is one scene that even before I watched the show, I was seeing memes about it. And it is when two of the contestants who do become a couple, well, I guess I should say Steven and Monica, and in there, they have this one explosive conversation that like, at least from me watching, I'm like, whoa, so first of all, the most DC question ever. Did you vote? What was your voting history like? He said in 2016, I did vote for Trump because I couldn't stand Hillary Clinton. In 2020, I did vote for Biden. And, I guess I was like uneducated in 2016. And then he drops this gem, which is that, oh, my whole life I had been told I was Italian, like I hung Italian flags in my apartment, blah, blah, blah. Come to find out, I'm like 1/8 Black, and my grandmother had just been lying about it this entire time. So that was a big surprise. And then in that conversation, Monica is like, oh, well, I am also mixed race. And he calls her a mutt.
Yes.
I was like, oh, how could this get worse? And then that came up and I was like, oh, what?
I literally, I cringed so hard, I felt it in my fingers and my toes.
Oh
I was
my
just,
God.
my whole body just, shriveled up on the couch. And I was I was alone, so I was I have no support for this moment right now. And I was just looking to Monica through the screen, and I was like, girl, you need to give me a sign, blink twice if this is not. But it was odd to me, and it could have been how it was edited, but it seemed like she had no reaction. But I'm like, that would make me so uncomfortable. That's such a weird thing.
Monica's better than me because that would be the last conversation we ever had. I'd be like, oh, Mud, okay. And then we would never talk. I should add, it's clear that he's not trying to say it rude. But I still and I mean, it really goes into more about how I think about Monica. I feel like they're really framing Monica as you're a 36-year-old Black woman in D.C., you're not married, you don't have kids, you may as well be dead.
Right.
And I almost feel like it almost seems like she is presented in the first few episodes as kind of desperate and, anything that Steven says, she's like, oh my God, he's a genius. Oh my God, I love him. So over the top. That seems to fade toward the end of episode 6. She's sort of I don't know. But I do think it has to do with both her race and her age, why they're presenting her as being so amenable to this guy who kind of comes off like a little bit of adult.
Yeah, 1,000%. Something that I found really interesting is the way she frames Steven a lot is oh my gosh, he's so much better than me. He has evolved in this way emotionally, which, you know what? Give credit where it's due. Because it is something to get to learn about your past and your identity and to confront that. But also she deserves a lot of credit too. She's a very well-established woman. She is also, just as worthy as having a partner as Steven is. And I'm noticing and again, we're just getting a little taste because we've only seen a bit of the honeymoons that not to say childish, I'm not going to go that far, but I was Steven is growing in some ways that Monica doesn't have to. And so I think
that was so diplomatic.
Yes,
that was nice.
Yeah. So putting anybody on a pedestal on either side of a relationship is already a dangerous spot. And I feel that bubble is about to get real burst outside of the pods for Monica because I'm Steven's still growing.
I agree. He kind of gives big, goofy guy. I think he brings a lot of positive energy to her, but I don't know if that energy, if he's going to meet her on the more serious moments.
Yeah.
That when they get back into the real world and move in together and he meets her family, can he kind of bring it down a little bit and be willing to have a conversation without making a joke or trying to deflect? I feel that's kind of his thing. So I'll be curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, no mutts.
No mutts.
No mutts.
Yeah, no. Oh
no
my God.
more mutt jokes, Steven.
Were either of y'all surprised that both Monica and Marissa said they had dated Trump supporters in the past?
To be honest, no.
I also was going to say no. I feel bad. I was going to say no, but yeah, I'm not surprised. Chelsea, why weren't you surprised?
I mean, I think this is such a DC conversation too. Everyone talking about who they voted for, perceptions of their politics. But I think we like to think that everybody in DC, or we think that everybody in DC votes one way. DC is a liberal city, but there are also a lot of conservative people here, especially during the Trump years. So it kind of does make sense that maybe during that time she had met somebody. She doesn't give much of how she felt about it is the thing. Where she just says, I dated somebody who was a Trump supporter. And she said she dated them. I forget who said she said she dated this guy for 3 years.
Marissa. Yeah.
Okay. But she never says I didn't like that. I never felt uncomfortable with that. So I think that, maybe she also has views. I don't know if she's more conservative or more centrist, but yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel like that was a big ick for her.
Yeah. And when she's on her date with Bowden, they have this conversation that I feel the show is clearly trying to make it seem people in DC, they will date across the aisle. Dating involves having these serious conversations about race and gender and politics. When Bowden is oh, I think that if you work full time, you should be able to have a house and healthcare. And she's
Yeah.
wow, that's so deep. That's so cool. To me, that really was, I don't know. It felt kind of the bar is very low. But I think the show, in the universe of the show, they're trying to show like, oh, these are people in DC who are very sort of politically aware, politically engaged. This is the kind of conversation that would come up on a date.
Yeah. Yeah.
I almost get the impression from her that she is a little bit like more open to different ideas or like whatever her partner like. I don't know. I don't know if she's like super set in her political views.
I know that vibe. Like a little bit of a chameleon. Like, ooh.
Yeah. Like whatever. Which I think is interesting. I think like we have this like perception that like people in DC, we're never going to date across the aisle. There's a lot of bipartisan couples here. So I don't know. I felt like that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. There are a lot of bipartisan chicks here too. So I feel like that it's like,
yeah.
Like, again, like DC is a melting pot. Like you're going to get a little bit of everything. I felt like what was captured really well in the conversations, like, and this goes like with bipartisan talks, this goes with even like more liberal talks, like, too, is just like, I appreciated like hearing DC DMV folks, like the openness of those conversations. I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, you come to DC and it's really stuffy and it's just like people, all they talk about is politics. All they talk about is this. They don't care about anything else except like work and politics. But I really appreciated that I'm like, DC is a very fluid place. Like we have interests outside of what we do. Like we have interests outside of who we vote for. I can imagine the producers probably maybe nudging that question a little bit, maybe not, but probably where they're just like, yeah, talk about voting. Like that's like what you DC people do. It's like everybody votes. But I was really excited to kind of see how those conversations blossomed outside of that, especially like Marissa. Like the downside is we didn't get to hear her perspective about what that conservative relationship was to her. But the upside is we got to learn a lot about Marissa outside of that. And like also it's kind of reflected in her choice of Ramses as well over Bowden, because it seemed like she was like, you know, I'm not just like this military girl, like doing the same thing over and over. Like I kind of want to explore something different. And I don't know, that was my impression.
The National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. has reopened after a breathtaking top-to-bottom renovation. And we're celebrating the voices and achievements of women artists from around the world. Visit now to see Suchitra Matai, Myth from Matter, a new exhibition of richly layered and vibrant paintings, sculptures, and installations that use saris, vintage needlepoints, jewelry, and bindis to imagine a past that lifts up women and people of color. Tickets at nmwa.org. That's nmwa.org. And speaking of like couples sort of reflecting conversations that you might imagine happening in DC couples, like I want to talk about Garrett and Taylor. Like, so first they did have what I don't know how y'all felt about this moment, but when Garrett learns that Taylor is non-white, and he's like, what's she hiding?
Yeah,
you know? That was the weirdest thing. What did y'all think?
That bothered me. That bothered me a lot. And I was just like, also, for like, Chelsea, you gave such a perfect summary of what the show is. It is Love is Blind. Like, I don't know why some people get in the pods and they're like, what do you look like? What's your last name? Where are you from?
Right.
Like, take that. You should be on Love Island, honey.
No, literally.
If you're looking for a bombshell, like, you're on the wrong show.
Literally. Like, and not to say that not talking about culture isn't important, because it is really important, especially in interracial relationships, to make sure you're holding space for your partner and understanding your partner. That being said, Taylor's hesitation was very valid, but I feel like Garrett interpreted that as her hiding something, and like that felt really off to me, and like I actually like put a big old star around that, because I was just like, why is this so important to you? I'm just like, if you're really feeling this person, like why does that feel disingenuous that she wants you to know her for her and not like what she looks like, which is the name of the show. So
Yeah, that was really weird. I did not like that. I did not like that he kind of was like, he kind of kept digging himself deeper. Like, he mentioned the way she was speaking, which was like very uncomfortable. It just was very weird. I think later he says that he's only ever dated white women.
Yep.
And I think he was trying to come back to that conversation to explain his reaction. It was a little late for me. Like, why was that a whole reaction earlier like that? Again, why did you need to like know this so much? Like, it's Love is Blind. But yeah, no, I really wanted to root for them. That moment sticks in my head a lot as I'm continuing to watch.
Taylor's stronger than me, though, because she was like, I appreciate that feedback, which I'm like, that is a very DC response. But
it sounds like you're on a like one-on-one with your boss. Thank you for that feedback.
Right. I was just like, I'm not about to tell somebody on a date with, thank you for the feedback. Oh, no, I'm out of here. I'm out of here.
And later they have this conversation on their honeymoon where they're talking about sort of, we're both professionally aggressive, you know, people that have full lives and full demanding careers. How are we going to make that work? Now, that was a conversation that really resonated with me. And then later I thought, oh, people who don't live in DC, that's probably what they think of when two sort of DC type A high flyer types get together. What did you all make of that?
It's weird because I almost felt like it was a little bit of an about face, at least for him, from the pods, where he's like, I want to have kids in a few years. And she was like, I'm going to wait because my career is very important. So I don't know. It almost felt like maybe the producers were pushing them in the direction of like, hey, you guys live in DC. Don't you guys work a lot? Like, what's that going to look like? I think it's going to have to depend when they come back to the real world, because when they come back from the honeymoons, they do have to start going to work.
Yeah.
And that is like when the problems start to come in. Like some of them are like, where are you going? And it's like, work. Where do you think they're going?
It's called a job, babe. Do you have one?
I don't know. I want to see how they feel when they move in together.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, 10 days off. That's 10 days that you're leaving. That's 10 days of work that you're coming back to. You know, that's going to set them back for a while. And like, I remember when they were doing the casting in the area, the first thing I thought was, I was just like, oh, who are you going to find that's going to be able to take the time off to do this show? And again, like, we talk about this dichotomy of like, DC isn't just all workaholics. It's like, we work hard, but we play hard too. There's, I think, a good balance, but the work hard kind of comes first. I don't want to like transition too early, but I was just like, there was one person on the show who, you know, left it all on the floor, like, to come to the pods and was like, you know what? Screw my job. I'm here.
Hannah. Let's
Hannah,
get into it.
Our Hannah. A lot to save with there.
Yes, because there is like I guess like a love square between, and it's like some of the weirdest TV I've ever watched. Hannah, who says that she quit her job to come on the show.
Wild.
Brittany, who is an esthetician, but like later is like, I aspire to be a trophy wife. I gotta say, I want to hate Brittany, but I like low-key love her.
I love her.
You can't hate her. She's that girl. She's kind of that girl. Brittany is Brat. Brittany is everything. Brittany is Barbie. She's Bunny. I don't know. Whatever she wants to be, she can be. Sorry. I do love Brittany. I will defend her.
Yes, I love her too. Yes, with Hannah, Nick D, Leo, and Brittany, it is an extremely weird dynamic, especially when it finally comes down to it. Leo and Brittany do not continue on the show.
No.
They get engaged, and a title card shows up to say that they were not invited on the honeymoons, which is so crazy. But then they ended up breaking up. So it is just like a very weird vibe going on between the four of them. I'm curious to see if Leo makes an appearance again after like he had like a full-on tantrum when Hannah had suggested that she had felt stronger about Nick, which was funny because they played him having this tantrum to Hannah, and then immediately after, Bowden getting broken up with and him saying, it's okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Was so... The editing, I was like, oh.
I also found it really weird that Leo and Brittany, they get engaged and then you don't see them anymore for the honeymoon. I did a little digging, and so take this for what it's worth, but according to some of the tea that I've gotten into, I read a Vulture article that heavily implies that Leo was asking producers if they could help him get a prenup, because like, I guess he felt like he was concerned that if this actually does result in a real marriage, like I actually do need to protect my assets, one. Also, I read another interview with them on Netflix's like editorial slate To Dumb, and it made it seem like both of them were just like really itching to be on TV. Like Leo was like, I didn't think they were going to cut me because I was part of a love triangle. Like that's good TV. So I honestly think it might go back to that initial point that you were making about how this is a very like self-serious show. And so they don't want the people who are like, I'm here to make good TV. I think that they genuinely want couples who seem like they might have energy or chemistry. And when they got engaged, the vibes were definitely off, right?
Yes, 1,000%. Bridget, I'm so glad. See, this is why it's nice to talk to journalists, because I put another big star when Leo had that reaction with Hannah, because Hannah realized she wanted to pick Nick D. She was just like, Brittany, girl, I'm dropping him. Like, not, just to be like, yeah, go like have him. It's fine. But like they hugged it out. The sisterhood was like very clear. I felt like it was very mature between them because it's an insane scenario. Like that's just the bottom line. And so it like the love square triangle was kind of resolved. Nick was happy. Hannah was happy. Leo could have been happy with Brittany. But like when Leo had his little tantrum that he did with Hannah, and her reaction, I felt like was very fair to be like kind of thrown off by that, because I was thrown off by it. I was like, if Hannah and Brittany are supposed to be basically both of your number ones, right? You're just like, no, it's not like number one, number two. Like, I could just like close my eyes and propose to either of you. Like, it's the same. I'm just like, then you would not be this down because you still technically have your number one, right? But he didn't know, like, if Brittany was going to accept him. And so he was to me, I was just like, this man just wants to be on TV. I don't think Hannah and Leo were compatible. I don't think Brittany and Leo were compatible. I think Leo is compatible with his Rolex. That's what
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
Like, and all the bros being obsessed with the Rolex. I was like, have that. Have that. Love that for you. Live your truth. Honey, get the prenup and marry the watch. Like, you don't need to do all this. This is too
Right.
much.
We haven't mentioned this about Leo, but what you just did with the Rolex, like, he spends most of his time on screen complaining that he's rich and that people only love him for his money. And if I feel like the show, for the most part, did a good job of, like, trying to pull away from, like, stereotypes about DC or, like, Washington, capital W. He really fits that niche, I think, and kind of scratched that itch of, like, somebody who feels very self-important.
Oh my God.
And it was, honestly, it did make good TV for a little bit, but I was kind of glad we got rid of him after a little bit.
Yeah, they were merciful.
I wrote in my notes. So first of all of my notes were how much I hated Leo. If I like, we could do a bonus episode about my thoughts on Leo. I wrote, not only do I not think that Hannah nor Brittany should date Leo, I don't think any woman should date Leo.
Period.
And they kind of make Brittany, they're kind of giving Brittany, and she's sort of, playing into it. She's doing the dumb blonde trophy wife edit thing, but she really nails it when she says, he's in sales. What if I'm just another sale to him? And I'm like, honey,
Yes.
ding, 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 ding.
No, this is what I mean. Brittany is that girl. And I was really proud of her when she wrote that letter. And she said, I came in here trying to write all the things that I love about you, and I couldn't. And I like threw my notebook on the ground and I said, I know that's right. I was like, you better. And then he proposed and she said yes.
And she said yes.
Like, I couldn't take it.
One of my favorite quotes of the whole episode is when she's like, this is the longest letter I've ever written in my life. My friends would see me write this long letter and be like, who is this? And it's one page front and back.
I love her. She lives her truth, like,
all the way through. The way through. Which also, this is a season of letters, I'll say. Letters and like writing, which I'm very biased because I love a good love letter. Writing one and receiving one. But I was very surprised with just like the like novels that were and poems being like that. I feel like is abnormal. Not abnormal, but like more than normal this season. So that was a nice little bonus.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. When I think about October, I think about masks. And no, not the face masks we all wore during the pandemic. I think about Halloween and wearing costumes. For parties, it's all in good fun, but for some of us, this feeling of wearing a mask in our daily lives, pretending to be somebody else, is constant, and it can be draining. That's why talking to a professional who can help is so important. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp makes it easier than ever to take this first step. It's all online. You just fill out a quick questionnaire to be matched with a licensed therapist, and then you design your own plan based around your schedule. And if you ever want to change your therapist at any time, you can, for no extra charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/citycast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/citycast.
So I want to talk about another couple who I was sort of surprised at the end of episode 6, what happens with them, Alex and Tim. I guess I didn't feel like they had chemistry throughout the show. I was like, they seem a little bit like a mismatch. However, I'm so like, what, like, they have what sounds like a really explosive fight, but the fight happens off camera after they go on the retreat to Mexico. I felt like I had a hard time understanding what exactly the fight was about, but it sounds like it was a barn burner.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. He literally says that she had put her hand over his mouth to stop it, which I gasped. I was like, that is very uncomfortable. That's terrible. With them, I also was like, I don't know what the vibe is between you two, because I felt like he gives her a lot in their conversations. He has a really difficult backstory with his family, and she doesn't give him anything. And then they have this huge fight, and it's like, okay, what?
Yeah. I was like a little nervous in the pods. Like, first of all, I had a box of tissues the whole like first 4 episodes. Like, and you know, for those who have watched, you know that like there were at least like 3 or 4 or 5 like really traumatic, sad stories. And Tim's was like really, really like awful, like with the loss of his sisters and his siblings. And something I like made a note of in their conversations was like in the pods, it like always felt a little bit one-sided, like in their conversations. Again, editing, we always have to remember that, you know, these are actual people. But I noticed that like I was happy that like Tim felt like he had space to kind of like talk about that trauma that he experienced, but it felt like a lot of pressure, not necessarily to Alex, but like to his future partner, to be like, I'm trying to fulfill this like loss that I've experienced with my sister, with my wife. You know, like even emblematically and symbolically, like giving her a bracelet, like from his sisters, like to her. And like, he's like, I don't fight like at all. Like if I'm getting argumentative in any way, then I'm out of the door. And I'm like, oh, I was just like, what kind of relationships do you not argue? And like, there are diplomatic ways of arguing, but it like, you don't get a sense of what Alex really wants out of a relationship. It's clear what Tim wants. It's clear, like, where he's coming from. But with Alex, like, I noticed outside of the pods, there were, like, kind of, like, little nitpicky things. She was just like, don't quit talking about that dog. Why do you keep talking about that dog? Which, he's like, I'm gonna say it. And she's like, don't you say it. Don't you dare say it. And I thought she was kidding. I think she was serious. I was like, she was getting annoyed with like little things that he was doing. So like there seems like a mismatch there. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But like the fact that their relationship almost ended on day 2, I don't know.
He packed his stuff and left.
Left. And was unsure about sleeping in separate rooms still. He was like, I don't know. I can't decide that right now. I was like, okay. So
yeah, it's weird. I felt like I had been kind of rooting for them because Tim seemed like he really wanted to like heal from a lot of what he experienced. But I think to your point, that is a lot to ask of somebody. First of all, you're not even seeing, and then you're seeing for the first time and you're engaged. Like that's like a speed run. I'm concerned about them. I wanted to root for them, but I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Well, another couple that I'm kind of rooting for is Ashley and Tyler. They just seem like a couple of people who really like each other and are really excited to be with each other. Maybe they're a couple that might make it in the end. What do you all think?
I didn't like see them prominently in the teaser at the end of like like episode 6. Like usually they'll give a teaser for like the episodes to come when they drop. And so I was like, that is a good sign to me because that means they're uninteresting, happy, and in love. I love
Right.
Yes, I love that. I feel the same way. I barely have any notes on them because I was like, they just seem cool. Like he is very into her. She's into him. Like they seem like they're having a really fun time. They made me feel like the couples that I've seen in previous seasons where you don't really see much of them because there's not much that like you need to see that's not like, oh, they're in love. I feel like this is kind of the time too where you start to find out if there's a physical interest and like sex and intimacy becomes a big part of the conversation. And us not really hearing that from them, I think is a good sign. Whereas like Hannah and Nick D, Hannah literally said when she first met him that she was kind of disappointed in how he looked. She felt like he wasn't truthful about how he looked.
Yeah.
Which, like, to be fair, he said he looked like Superman.
Henry Cavill.
He's an attractive dude, but that's don't say that.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous for Hannah and Nick, like, or maybe not nervous because I feel like if they realize it's not going to work out, that's like healthy and important. It's okay to end things that are not working. Like, don't push the issue. But I like that flip was really interesting in and out of the pods between the two of them. Like, he was really hyping himself up. But something I noticed with both of them, like, she was actually very open about her insecurities and like with both Nick and Leo in the pods. Like, I felt like that naturally came up. Nick, I think, had the exact same concerns. His way of conveying it is like putting on that facade of like, yeah, girl, what's up, girl? They call him Rico Suave, Nikki Suave, or like whatever. And like, now I thought that was a very DC type of dude. I remember like going through like the cast stuff, like when they're like different news articles, and like one of the places he shouted out was Decades.
Oh, right.
And I was like, oh, I would see Nick Dorca at Decades. I probably have. Like, I probably have at some point. Like, because he would be the dude to come up and be like, hey, girl, you know, like, I used to play football. I'm a kicker. I kind of look like Superman. Like, what it do? He had a chain on.
Oh, my God. Asia, It's so funny that you say this because I literally, in my notes, I wrote, Nick, unfortunately, is very much my type. I am repulsed, yet unfortunately titillated.
But you know what? You know, I like promised myself I would bring it up. Like, Duckgate was like very important to me. It was very important because like in the pods, right? Like they're both, I think, have their own insecurities. They come out, I think the roles switch where Hannah's like, oh, this guy is like, I got this. Like, why was I worried? Like, I'm the one you're reaching for. You're the settler, which, again, those kind of dynamics, like, that's not healthy on either account. And so you can tell that, like, Hannah's now kind of, like, picking at Nick a little bit. And nothing is, like, more indicative of that when Nick decides he wants to ride a duck. Okay? If he wants to ride that duck, if you want to ride a duck, you ride that duck, okay?
Yeah.
Like, live your truth. It was, like, the first time I felt like he was actually being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like, funny enough. Like, he was like, I'm Nick Dorca, and I want to ride a duck.
Gave her the ick.
Right. And it gave her the ick. And she was like, don't you dare ride that duck. And he's like, I'm going to ride it. I'm going to ride the duck, and goes and does it with like this lovely older lady that I feel like was very playful about the whole thing. And she was like, don't be jealous, girl. We're just riding ducks. Like, and it didn't seem like that big of a deal. And then it just became like this open floodgate of like, well, actually, Nick, these are all the reasons why I'm like unsure about you. Like, you're delusional. Here's a list of 8 to 10 things.
Write a physical list.
Yes.
And then leave it on the dresser. Subtle, babe.
Right.
Really subtle.
Right.
Yeah.
Without any conversation, and then like separately going to like talk with her friends. If you can't talk to your partner about like what's going on and really level with it, it's just like, what are we doing? Like, what's going on? So I was actually surprised to like sympathize for both of them. I think there's like some miscommunication going on, and I think again there's growth on like both sides that like needs to happen. But just let a man ride a duck. I was like, Hannah, girl, I was like, he chose you. Also, for what it's worth, he only chose you.
Yeah.
Yes.
From the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He was going to leave. He said, Hannah, you know what? There's no point in me being here. And I have a lot of respect for that.
Well, the Hannah-Nick dynamic is definitely, there's something brewing there. We will definitely keep an eye on it. So our couples who get engaged and go to Mexico are Hannah and Nick, Ashley and Tyler, Steven and Monica, Garrett and Taylor, Marissa and Ramses, yes. Tim and Alex, ? Maybe. We will keep an eye on all of these dynamics. So rapid fire question before we wrap. Are there couples that you think like, oh, they're going to make it to the end?
Ashley A. and Tyler, I think, like we said, like they're minding their business. They seem to be enjoying themselves. I think possibly Taylor and Garrett. I wonder if we're going to see them lean in more to this like high-powered couple that they're out doing their thing. She's so beautiful.
She's
and very
gorgeous.
Cool that I'm kind of like, what are you doing on this show? Like, what was going wrong? I was watching this at Metro Bar, and one of my friends was in town from Philly, and she turned to me and she's like, the fact that Taylor is on this show, I does not speak highly of the DC dating scene. And I was like, oh. I think there's possibly his weird reaction to her being mixed aside, which like that's a big thing. I think there's something there that like we're going to see develop more that I'm like, all right, they might actually last. I don't know.
I'm pretty like aligned with you, Chelsea. I think like Tyler and Ashley are like my end game. I'm rooting for them. I'm okay with not seeing them on screen because I feel like, again, should not be there. It's going to be stuff that is not for us, and that's okay.
Yes.
It's just for the two of them, so I hope they enjoy that. I think that Taylor and Garrett are the most DC couple, but like in the way that Garrett is like very analytical. He's a physicist, you know, he's like very serious about his career. Taylor is very serious about her career too. I feel like their careers won't get in the way, but I think the logic of like not dealing with extra problem solving within the relationship so that they can focus on other things that matter to them might be what like keeps them apart. So they've got to like kind of transition into being able to sacrifice and fight, I think, for the relationship too. So we'll see. We'll see how it pans out, but they're very DC.
Well, we will see. Asia, Chelsea, thank you for being here. I will see you in the pods.
Yes.
Yes, it looks really fine.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with the reality TV aficionado in your life. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.